Hello everyone, welcome to today's video. So in this video today, we'll be solving some sample scenario-based question and answers for your PMP certification exam in 2023. So we'll be discussing a wide range of topics across the PMP exam syllabus, covering questions from waterfall projects and also covering extensively agile and hybrid project management topics as well. So if you are preparing for the PMP certification exam in 2023, this video will help you understand the type of questions that you might expect in the actual exam. Now, while solving these questions, guys, I'll be time and again referring to this video on my YouTube channel that talks about the exact framework that you need to use in your PMP exam when you solve a scenario-based or situational question. So make sure you watch this video during the initial stages of your PMP exam preparation. Also, I would like you to track your performance in this video when you solve the questions with me, okay? So the target will be to get all the 5 out of 5 questions correct, okay? However, even if you get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct in this video, you can consider yourself fairly well prepared for your PMP exam. Now, anything less than 4, you might need a bit more preparation, okay? So with that, let's start with question number 1.
Right. So the first question, guys, pause the video, read the question properly and try to answer it before moving forward. Okay, so we'll start solving the question together. One of your team members have become suddenly unavailable during the project due to long-term illness. Okay, now this is an unplanned event. This has resulted in rescheduling of certain project activities which were on critical path. In a project review meeting, you find out that one critical path activity and a couple of subcritical path activities are planned to occur at the same time now. Now here you need to understand at least the basic difference of a critical path and a subcritical path, right? So I would recommend that you go and watch this video on my YouTube channel, which talks about the key difference between a critical path and a subcritical path, okay? So it will be expected, guys, that you know the basics of these finer nuances of the different topics of project management when you are writing the PMP exam, okay? Right, so the question is, the sponsor is concerned about the situation. What should be your first step as a project manager? So if we go back to the framework that we have discussed in this video, so the first step is to read the question, read the options and try to categorize it as a type 1 or a type 2 question. Okay. Now, if you see the stem of this question, which is asking about the first step you should do as a project manager, this typically hints to a type 2 question, right? Which is directed towards assessing your understanding about the various steps in project management as the PMBOK mandates. Okay. So with that in mind, let's start evaluating the options A, B, C, and D. And while evaluating that, we'll keep the positive bias principle in mind, which means that we'll not eliminate any option from the table until and unless there is a solid reason to reject that option. Okay, right. So option A, perform an assessment of the risks introduced as a part of this replanning. Now, this seems to be quite a reasonable approach to me, that you are performing an assessment first and then you plan on the different actions which may or may not be taken, etc., etc. So we'll hold this option for now. Option B, plan to stick to the baseline to avoid any risks occurring. Now, realistically, guys, this will not be possible, right? Because you are already off baseline at the moment and the risk has already happened in your project. So it is not a risk anymore. It's an issue which you need to handle, right? So that way, option B is incorrect. Moving on, option C, review the risk register and prioritize the risks. Now, this is also an incorrect option, guys, okay? Because in the essence, you need to understand that first, when a risk has happened, the first thing is not that you start reviewing your risk register and start prioritizing the risks, right? You have to do an assessment of the risk first. You have to plan the risk responses, etc., etc. Okay, so that way, option C is jumping steps, and that is why option C is an incorrect option. Option D, plan responses for the risks introduced as a part of this replanning. Now this is also a very close option, guys. Okay, now what is a smart way of knowing what is the correct answer between option A and option D, guys? Okay, now for that you need to refer to this table of the 49 processes of PMBOK, which is a part of your process group practice guide as well. And in this table, if you look at this section of the risk response planning, what is the first step? The first step is identifying the risk. Okay, next is to perform a qualitative risk assessment, and then it is to perform a quantitative risk assessment. So essentially what you are doing through these two techniques, you are assessing the impact of the risk. Okay, and after that you go ahead and plan your risk responses, right? So it's very clearly mandated as a part of the process group practice guide that what would be the steps in terms of doing a risk assessment when a risk occurs in your project. You jump a step, you get your answer incorrect. So with that logic, you can definitely say that option A here is the correct option because it hints to the first step of the risk assessment procedure, which is to perform an assessment of the risks. You can use quantitative methods, you can use qualitative methods, whatever works for you. But in the end, you should not jump steps when you are answering questions like this. Okay, why plan risk responses is incorrect? This is because it is jumping steps and it is suggesting that you plan responses even before you do an assessment. Okay, so that is not according to the PMBOK guideline. So that is why the correct answer to this question is option A, which is to perform an assessment of the risks introduced as a part of this replanning. Now there is a full video on my YouTube channel, guys, which will help you to understand how you can memorize this daunting chart of the 49 processes of PMBOK using pattern and logic, right? So you need not to do a rote memorization. Just by identifying some pattern and using some common sense, you will be able to recall this chart in your exam as the need may be. Okay, so for this question, we recalled the portion of risk management, right? And that was enough to help us understand why A is the correct answer and D was the incorrect answer. Okay, so I would recommend that you go ahead and watch this video from my YouTube channel as well. Okay, and now let's move on to question number 2.
If you are liking this video, guys, please press the like button. Also, if you are preparing for the PMP certification exam, check out my mock simulator and my 35 PDU training course on the PMP certification exam on Udemy. Both the courses are very highly rated amongst the students, and a lot of PMP aspirants have already passed their exam with the help of these courses. Okay, I will provide the links in the description section of this video. Now let's move on to question number 2.
Okay, so question number 2, guys. Pause the video, read the question, and try to answer it before we move forward. Right, so let's start solving this question, guys. So this question is typically a question which is testing your understanding about agile methodology. Okay, you can't like typically classify this as a type 1 or a type 2 question because this is a question which is directed towards testing your subject matter expertise. Okay, so basically you need to know what these terms mean. Okay, so what is sprint planning, what is fishbowl window, what is feature driven development, what is a spike, etc, etc. So I would recommend here to watch the videos on my YouTube channel where I have discussed such critical topics about agile which will be important from a PMP exam standpoint. Okay, so anyways, let's start solving this question together. There has been a merger of leadership between two tech firms, Social Space and Smart Cloud. Okay. As a result of this, the developers and the coding resources of both the companies are currently working across multiple agile teams for a common portfolio of projects. Okay. So quite a generic scenario where two companies have merged and the resources of the two companies are now clubbed together working towards a common portfolio of projects. Which is the best suited agile practice to ensure seamless release planning between the teams? Okay, so there are four options given. So the only way you'll be able to answer this question is if you know what is a sprint planning, what is a fishbowl window, what is feature driven development, and what is a spike. Okay, so let's go one by one. Sprint planning. So sprint planning is something which is very generic to all agile projects, right? So sprint planning is the planning phase of a iteration. Okay, so when you start an iteration to deliver a version of a product, you do the planning of that sprint before you start the actual iteration process, right? So that way it is a quite generic terminology, and it is nowhere specific to this scenario where two companies have merged and you have a common set of objectives to be achieved with two different set of teams. Okay, so the teams of social space on one side and the team of spark cloud on the other side. Okay, so that way sprint planning is something which you do anyways in agile projects. Okay, and it has no link to this scenario or to this context, so that is why this is an incorrect option. Fishbowl window, that is an incorrect option as well. So if you know about fishbowl window, guys, so it is a type of a communication channel which is established either to brainstorm an idea or to enable virtual connectivity across agile teams who are not co-located. Okay, so if you don't know about fishbowl window, guys, I would recommend that you go and study about fishbowl window in agile projects. Okay, so that way this option is incorrect. Okay, now, what is a feature driven development? So, a feature driven development, guys, is an agile software development methodology that focuses on delivering features incrementally. It involves a 5 step process like domain walkthrough, design by feature, building by feature, code inspection, design inspection, etc. etc. Feature-driven development is generally applicable for large companies and when there is a complex exchanges of information that is planned to happen between various agile teams working with a common objective. Okay, the development process in a feature driven development is organized around feature items that collaborate to deliver specific features, ensuring a disciplined and efficient approach to software planning. So that way, guys, this option seems a very reasonable option to me, and we'll park this option for now. Next, let's talk about option D, spike. So what is a spike, guys? So in Agile, a spike refers to a time box task or investigation undertaken to explore and address technical or design uncertainties related to a user story or a feature. So basically a spike is type of a brainstorming event which you do in focused groups to analyze a complex user story or a complex feature in a iteration or in a backlog, right? So now with that, if you know about spike, you know that this is also an incorrect option because in this scenario, guys, nowhere it has been stated that there is something of a brainstorming that's happening with a user story or a feature as a result of this merger. Okay, so spike is totally out of context in this scenario. Okay, so that way the correct answer to this question is option C, which is feature driven development. So the reason I discussed this question as a part of this exercise, guys, is to help you understand the importance of subject matter expertise regarding the topic of Agile when you are preparing for your PMP exam in 2023.
I hope you are finding the video useful, guys. If you do, please consider subscribing to this channel. It will help me to understand that you consider these kind of videos useful for your exam preparation, and it will also motivate me to prepare more such content like this for you in my future videos. And now let's move on to question number 3.
Question number 3, guys. Pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before we solve it together. Right, so let's start. A critical activity during a sprint was delayed due to some impediments which were not resolved on time. Okay. However, the delay was within tolerance set by the client and hence it did not cause any major escalation. Okay. The product owner wants to prevent this type of situation from occurring in future. Okay, so this is a very important term which you need to note when you are reading the question in step 1 of the 3-step framework that we have discussed. Okay, now which is the best suited agile ceremony to discuss this issue? So I'm assuming, guys, that by now you know the basics about agile ceremonies. Okay, if not, please go ahead and watch this video on my YouTube channel. So the options are backlog refinement, retrospective, daily stand-up, and product demo. Okay, now let's talk about backlog refinement. So backlog refinement during a sprint happens to prioritize user stories which are more important or more relevant to an iteration or to a product feature, and thus committing your time and resources to work on those items first before you pick up other stories or other features. Okay, so that way this doesn't fit the bill when you are discussing about let's say learn from experience, which is the scenario you're talking about, right? So that way backlog refinement is a incorrect option here. Retrospective, this is a really good option because in retrospective what you do that it's typically learn from experience event where after a sprint or after an iteration you sit in a room with your team and discuss about what went well, what did we do right or what went wrong, and what did we do incorrectly so that we can correct ourselves in the next sprint. Okay, so that way retrospective is a pretty strong choice here, but I'll hold this option for now because I have not yet evaluated option C and option D. Okay, next is daily stand-ups. Now, daily stand-up is a ceremony that happens every day in a agile project where you assemble in a huddle room and discuss about the plan of the last 24 hours, see what went well, what went wrong, and discuss about the plan for the next 24 hours. So if you see, the planning horizon of a daily stand-up is 24 hours ahead of time or maximum, let's say 48 hours ahead of time. Okay, so you do not do a learn from experience in a daily stand-up which is of the previous sprint or the previous iteration. Okay, so that is a very crucial point of difference between a retrospective and a daily stand-up. Okay, and precisely for that reason option C is incorrect here, because in essence the scenario is asking that what should the product owner do to prevent these kind of situations occurring in future. Okay, so it is talking about a systemic fix which is generally achieved during a retrospective. Okay, now let's look at option D, product demo. Now this can be straight away eliminated, guys, because product demo is not a agile ceremony. Okay, so here is a classical example that how your subject matter knowledge can help you eliminate options straight from the table if it doesn't fit the requirements. Okay, so D is out because product demo is not a agile ceremony. So we are left with option B, which is the correct answer to this question, which is retrospective.
Next, let's move on to question number 4.
Right, so question number 4, guys. Pause the video, read the question properly before moving forward. So this is a multi-select question, okay? So please be aware of that. Right, so let's start solving the question together. During the chartering process of an end-of-line automation project, the sponsor advises to automate the quality sampling process with the help of collaborative robots, okay? Accordingly, a sub-scope is defined by the project manager to develop a prototype and confirm the reliability of the same. Okay, so basically whether the cobot will be able to do the quality sampling process as per the reliability metrics which has been designated in the project requirements. Okay, however, the department quality manager is not ready to support the project since she believes that this will lead to layoffs within her department. Now, this is a very valid concern by the quality manager because if it was the technicians from a team who were doing the statistical samplings, now if the cobot is installed, what will happen to their job, right? So there may be layoffs. So her concern is quite significant. Now let's look at the question. Which of the actions are suitable for the project manager in this scenario? And it is specifically asking you to choose two options from option A, B, C, and D. So in these type of multi-select questions in your PMP exam, it will categorically tell you that how many options you need to select. Okay, so you have to select two options which are correct from A, B, C, and D for this question. So let's look at the options one by one. Plan a meeting with the quality department manager to align expectations. Seems like a reasonable and a sensible option to me. So we'll hold this for now. Okay. Option B, redraft the business need of the project with the sponsor. Again, it's a very fleeting option, guys. Redrafting the business need means you are essentially saying that, okay, hold on, let's look at the project once again and redo the whole business need of the project because one of the stakeholders have raised concern. Okay, so now that's not a very sensible approach as a project manager. Okay, and again, as this option hints towards escalating things to your sponsor without even taking the ownership of trying to solve it yourself first, this is an incorrect option. Okay, option C, perform a benefits management review supported with cost benefit analysis. So this also looks like a reasonable option to me, right? Because you are doing a benefits management review and you are supporting your analysis with data, right? Which is a cost benefit analysis. So as a part of your cost benefit analysis, you can provide a recommendation or a risk mitigation strategy that if there is a chance of layoffs, what can be the redeployment strategies of the technicians who will be no longer required in the role, okay, or in the quality sampling process role, okay. Now, not having a role in a company doesn't necessarily mean that the person should be fired, okay. So the person can be redeployed to a different team, different organization, okay, different function. So there is a lot of possibilities that can be explored if you do a proper cost benefit analysis around the topic of layoffs which might happen due to a automation. So we'll hold option C for now as well. Option D, engage human resource to create a plan to avoid any layoffs. Okay. Now that is also a nonsensical option to me, guys, because of two reasons. Number one, it is not a core scope of your project to develop a plan for layoff mitigation. Okay. That is for HR to do. And that is something which is an administrative and operational activity rather than a project activity. Okay. Now, remotely, you might say that engaging human resource at the initiation stage of a project, because the project is just getting chartered here, might be a sensible approach, and I can agree to that. But in the end, you need to understand that for these kind of questions, you have to identify the two best possible answers, okay? And we have already got that, right? So option A and option C are two best possible answers, or let's say more relevant approaches which you can take as a project manager, which is in line with your project scope. Okay, so that way the correct answer to this question is option A and option C, and option B and option D are incorrect options.
I hope you are tracking your performance, guys. Okay, remember the target is to get all the 5 out of 5 questions correct. However, the minimum target is to get at least 4 out of the 5 questions correct. Okay, now here comes the final one.
So question number 5, guys, pause the video, read the question and try to answer it before we move forward. Right, so let's start solving the question together. There were gaps identified in understanding the approved definition of done for a product functionality which was to be developed across a few iterations. Okay, this has been highlighted in a sprint review meeting by one of the subject matter expert resources. Now you need to understand what is definition of done in the context of agile projects. Let's move on. As a result, the product has not met its acceptance criteria. How should the project manager tackle the situation? Now, if we look at the stem of the question, it's typically a type 1 question. So we'll be using the positive bias principle coupled with the ideal project manager behavior framework. Okay, so let's evaluate the options one by one. Trigger a change management process since the functionality was approved initially. Now, this is incorrect, guys. Okay, definitely the functionality was approved as it is mentioned here, but in the end you need to understand that it's a gap of your team, that your team was not able to understand or not able to comprehend the correct definition of done for the product functionality. So the onus lies on you and your team to correct the situation. So you just can't go and raise a change request for something which you have not understood correctly. Okay, so option A is incorrect. Next, plan a brainstorming session to tackle this impediment during the design phase. Now that's also a sensible option. I can hold this for now because essentially it's talking about problem solving. You have an impediment and you are trying to tackle it in the design phase, which is fairly early in a project. Okay, let's look at option C. Add this to the agenda for sprint retrospective after the iteration is completed. Again, it's a nonsensical option to me. Why would you wait till the end of the iteration and discuss something as a retrospective where you have to solve it now, today, with your team? Right? So that is just pushing problems under the carpet, and that is not a sensible approach as a project manager or as a scrum master in a agile project. So we can safely eliminate option C. Option D, plan a brainstorming session to tackle this impediment during the testing phase. Okay, now if you look very closely at option B and option D, the only point of difference is the design phase and the testing phase here. So one option is recommending you to tackle this problem in the design phase, which is fairly early in the project, and another option is recommending you to tackle the problem in the testing phase, which is fairly late in the project, right? Now, you tell me, guys, as a sensible project manager, what is a good approach to tackle a problem early or to tackle a problem late? Okay. Now, the answer is very simple, right? You have to have the capacity to tackle these kind of problems early in your project so that you can be more proactive and you don't end up spending more money and resources during the testing phase of the project, where there could be a lot of rework that would be generated if you try to address something which has been built wrong. Okay, so if the design is incorrect, trying to correct it in the testing phase might be a big challenge. Okay, so that way it is always a sensible approach to address such kind of issues in the design phase of the project, rather than having a reactive approach to tackle impediments in the testing phase of the project, which is fairly late in the project or in a sprint in agile project, right? So you see guys, you do not need a PhD level understanding of agile to answer such questions. Okay, a basic understanding of the terms and terminologies coupled with right common sense is enough to answer such kind of questions correctly. Okay, so the correct answer to this question is option B, and D is a incorrect answer choice.
So that's the end of the quiz, guys. Let me know in the comment section below, how did you perform? Okay, I'd be very interested to know that. However, even if you have scored less, that you are not able to get 4 or 5 questions correct from this video, do not be disheartened or do not worry. Okay, I'll be uploading more such practice question and answers videos like this on this channel in the future. So make sure you keep your bell notifications on to receive timely updates of those videos when I publish them. Meanwhile, please make sure that you check out my Udemy courses on PMP Certification Exam. I hope you liked the video, guys. Thank you, and I'll see you again in the next video.